Recently, I was shopping at Barnes& and Noble and I saw a magazine that had the title The Z Sex Recession, and the subtitle under it said, Gen Z has been raised alongside hookup apps and online porn, and yet rates of celibacy among young people are higher than they were in decades. The question posed by the author, Jim Tolentine, is why are our youth so chaste? For those of you unaware on Catholic theology, the Catholic belief is that every single person is called to chastity, and that looks different based on your state of life, your vocation. Chastity is different than celibacy. Celibacy is the vow a priest usually makes that he abstains from marriage. Chastity is abstination from immoral sex, that is, any kind of sex activity that is essentially out of marriage and not for the purposes of procreation. All of us are called to chastity based on our state of life. If you are unmarried, it means abstaining from all sexual activity. That would be any immoral sexual activity. For married people, it means abstaining from any sexual intercourse that is immoral. That is, with another person besides your spouse, or from other immoral sex with your spouse that is not for the purposes of procreation. Before we talk about any sex recession, we have to talk about the sexual revolution. In a previous episode, I talked about how a lot of issues that we have today go back to the Protestant revolt. That's at least my idea. Mostly it goes back to moves that were made by Protestant faiths, such as those of the Anglican community, mostly involving birth control. I also talked in the previous episode about how German sex education in the Archdiocese of Hamburg, about how Germany is the most sexually liberated country. Here's a summary of the sexual revolution from Wikipedia. The sexual revolution, also known as the sexual liberation, was a social movement that challenged the merit of traditional codes of behavior related to sexuality and interpersonal relationships throughout the Western world from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. Sexual liberation included increased acceptance of sexual intercourse outside of traditional heterosexual monogamous relationships, primarily marriage, the legalization of the pill, as well as other forms of contraception, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex, homosexuality, masturbation, alternative forms of sexuality, and abortion all followed. There's a good book I read, and I haven't finished it, but I was reading it at one point. In Jesus and John Wayne, there's an entire chapter speaking about the evangelical view of marriage that was being brought up at the time. To say this was only an evangelical idea, though, would be wrong, as there were even Catholic lay people involved in the supposed fight for sexual freedom. This was mostly talking about sex involved in marriage and the view that a woman should be ready for her man. But the sexual liberation has several things that stand out as issues, mainly birth control, abortion, and LGBT ideology. Pornography and masturbation are other issues as well. Both of these are often considered mostly male issues, and for a long time, pornography probably was something male only. Men in the times long past would purchase magazines of barely dressed or fully naked women, and then later men would purchase videos from video rental places, as an example. Now we have pornography online that, unlike previous forms of pornography, are available at the touch of a finger. Look at how pornography is depicted in popular culture, especially television. In older shows, men are often showed to purchase these aforementioned pornographic materials, or even now online. But Trent Horn points out that pornography is not just a form of a male only issue. And for sure, nowadays, it definitely isn't. There are other types of pornographic materials, such as books, and these books are popular among women especially. That being said, I am sure easily available online pornographic materials, such as images and videos, are an issue for both men and women. Pornography is also called adult content. In fact, I have seen that many states are attempting to have age bans on pornography that will try and keep children off of these sites. These same ideas were back with physical forms of pornography, such as magazines and videos. Of course, that was a little easier if you didn't look 18 and didn't look that. If you didn't look 18, if you were under 18, you didn't look over 18, and you couldn't prove you were with an ID, then no porn could be available for you. I don't see that this can be done with online forms of pornography. A young person can just say, I'm 18, even if they're not. Masturbation is also an issue. It's an issue of self pleasure. I don't know if it is a more male or female issue, although I believe it is mostly posed as a male issue. But nonetheless, it is an issue. It is a grave matter. Same with pornography. Same with most of the other issues we are speaking about today. The sexual revolution is not a single event, nor is it a single decade or a single year. As the Wikipedia article said, 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. It is a group of events, a group of years. More than that, it goes back to a couple of ideals. The other thing I want to talk about with this view of marriage and such is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is one of my favorite presidents, and I like him. He's a funny guy. He loved making jokes, and I know I'm not the only one who likes Reagan. However, he did one thing, at least one thing, that I cannot praise him for. That was a move he made as governor of California, as a Republican governor of California, which he allowed for no-fault divorce. The issue of the sexual revolution, which again, that's not the point of the video, but nonetheless deserves to be discussed here, is that even conservatives allowed liberal ideas, such as no-fault divorce, with the conservative Republican candidate Ronald Reagan, to infiltrate and allow them to happen. That society and governments as a whole allowed infiltration such as this to happen. They allowed a little to happen, and this snowballed into larger things. Trent Horn discussed this in his book on the LGBT playbook, that they pitted LGBT ideology, homosexuality, at that point as something to be normal. That is the hallmark of the sexual revolution. They used love as an example of the LGBT community. They did not use it per se, rather they distorted it and corrupted it. They used it to validate their own opinions and their own views, and society allowed that. If we go back to Trent Horn, we see with the LGBT love became something to justify gay marriage, and this snowballed into other parts of what we have of the LGBT ideology today, to what we see, pride parades and such, which was something that they said at the beginning should be avoided. But the problem with all this sexual revolution with LGBT, with birth control and marriage and the family, and this is a big problem. It's a distortion of our views of family and the marriage. I won't go deep down this whole idea of the family and the sexual revolution. That could be a video unto itself. But one thing you may have noticed is that young people are more conservative. And more than that, the young people are becoming more religious. In fact, as I was watching this, as I was writing the script for this video, I saw a video by Redeem Zoomer about why Gen Z is leaving leftism. Something I saw was that young lady, this is something I saw online, I don't know exactly, it was an article by, I believe, I can't think of the news source right now, but it was some article, and I saw it in other places, but is that young ladies are choosing to go to monasteries over the summer over other types of vacation, and this was an article I saw online, but that's just a side note. But I think more than this, what we see is a deeper divide between liberals and conservatives, besides people becoming more conservative, but there's also a greater divide between liberals and conservatives. Now, I did not read this article or get the magazine. All I needed to see was this title, which really intrigued me, and this became the idea for today's video. There is one theory: people are becoming more religious. That's the theory I'm promoting, and more conservative, because they find out that the secularism they were raised in is unfulfilling. Redeem Zoomer's video is really good, so I will be looking at some of it from here on in, and I will leave a link to it in the description. As well, he talks in the beginning about pill pushing. With any issue you have, pill pushing for mental, especially issues, which I have discussion about with friends, as well as with a parent who is a medical profession who sees this for herself more with female patients. And in fact, she recommended, and I have it, and maybe I'll look at it and read it at some point. I've got a whole lot of books I want to read. Recommended the book, The Anxious Generation. In fact, Redeem Zoomer points out that he talks about this circle. The decline in society we see leading to a regression is because of this cycle he talks about. A strong society will lead to a weaker one, leading to a stronger one, so on and so forth. Redeem Zoomer talked a lot about the same things I did here, albeit his point was talking about conservatism especially. People are being pushed into conservatism and then Christianity because, to put all his points into one, it fulfills them. They long for truth and beauty and tradition. Of course, for Redeem Zoomer and for me, he talks about this more in Christianity as a generality, whereas for a Catholic like myself, we talk about how that leads someone more to Catholicism. This is the same thing we see in the liturgy of the Catholic faith. People sought change, like the sexual revolution, but this change took something away. Of course, there's a great difference between the sexual revolution and the liturgical reforms. It's not a good comparison, and I'm not trying to compare them, but it's not one-to-one, but there are parallels between the two. The issue then is not just young men. It's silly to think that too. Young women, whether led by young men or not, or led by young women like young men, they're led by other conservative women online or conservative men. You get my point. The internet is another thing. People are able to search out the truth at the touch of their fingers, at the touch of a keyboard, rather. They also have access to content from others as well as AI. Dating apps are another thing that goes back to the internet, as the article was talking about. They are accessible easily, like internet pornography and easily accessible information. Now, I have some trouble with online dating. There's nothing necessarily wrong with dating apps, but myself, I believe meeting people at parishes or at schools or even through mutual friends is the way to do it way better than dating apps. So why is Gen Z regressing in their sexuality? It's because they disagree and remove themselves from their parents' ideologies. This is what Redeem Zoomer talks about in his video on why people are leaving leftism. Young people are becoming more and more conservative and religious, more than their parents. They are removing themselves from such ideologies. In this way, people are seeking truth and beauty over what pleases them in their own human taste, if you will. As well, they are seeking marriage as well, probably, as they seek lifelong, true commitment as well as a legacy. This is more with having children and making a family. There are many reasons, but for me, these are what comes to my mind. People see what they have, and they find it empty, and long for what is truly fulfilling. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm hoping to get quotes and photos in here, as well as cards and links, at least for those of you watching on YouTube. Thank you all for watching. God bless, and I will see you all next time.